Hello,
Hello.
let's talk about test design techniques, and we start in our set of videos with domain testing. Actually, this is a testing type. Hope you remember this from our previous videos, but today will talk about it in scope of test design techniques.
Yeah, domain testing is actually a very popular and widely used approach. So that's understandable why we decided to start with it.
Yeah, and here maybe I would like to mention that when we talking about domain testing, we usually think about some form with input fields. So also our future example will be about this.
Yeah, and there are some principles of domain testing, maybe. Let's start with the first one. It's quite common idea for any test design techniques, but domain testing sticks to it very well. So the main idea is to reduce the number of tests, yeah, and still create a good tests that will cover our requirements and will cover some possible risks.
Yeah, absolutely. And here I would like to mention to add that for sure we would like to reduce and this checks, but at the same time we shouldn't forget about as our general principles. So we should combine positive checks, but never combine negative checks.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And like beginners often forget about maybe the third principle a lot of time. So be sure that reducing the number of test cases by combining negative checks, that's impossible. That's out of question.
Yeah. And while when we are talking about domain testing, we include here several test design techniques. This is equivalence partitioning, boundary value analysis, and also pairwise testing. Uh, these test design techniques usually mentioned, especially in IS2KB, separately, but in real life, I can't imagine that we will use just, for example, boundary value analysis without equivalence partitioning, for example.
Yeah, actually, that's impossible to use boundary value
Yeah.
analysis because the first step is to identify equivalence classes. So to stick to the best results, you will definitely use some of test design techniques, but maybe test design techniques of domain testing are like closer to each other than any other.
Yeah, absolutely. And here also pairwise testing is mentioned. It's a separate test type, we can say, but usually it's also mentioned together with the main testing and using while applying the main approach.
Yeah, because
So,
it's mostly follow, yeah, principles of domain testing.
yeah.
So it can be considered together with equivalence partitioning and boundary value analysis.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start to deeply review each of these technique and starting with equivalence partitioning.
Yeah, maybe the most commonly used if we are talking about different types of domain testing. And this is always the first step because equivalence partitioning is also about dividing our possible input values into some classes, some similar classes. What does it mean? It means that the program will behave the same when you will input any representative of this class.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we are looking at our example, we have an input field here, enter a name, your nickname, and here you can see that some symbols can be inputted here, and the length of the field is from 6 to 25 symbols. So here we have like a minimum and a maximum, and we can divide all inputs in three classes, starting with invalid less than minimum class, then valid from minimum to maximum, and again new one in class invalid inputs more than maximum.
Yeah, and the idea while test designing, you can take just 1, 2, 3 representatives of each class, and if it will be error, any bug, yeah, so you can suggest that all other representatives will show the same bug. So you can reduce the number of test cases just picking up a couple of representatives.
Yeah, the goal is to input to check any representative from each class. Okay, so hope it's clear, and let's move on and review our second technique. It's a boundary value analysis.
Yeah, it is closely connected to the equivalence partitioning. That's so close that some sources consider boundary value analysis like extension of the previously mentioned techniques because it's impossible to use it without starting with division to equivalence classes.
Absolutely. And here we also look at our example. And if we are talking again about minimum and maximum, we can see that boundary values is like numbers before and after our boundary values for each class.
Yeah, that's like edges of each class, like the first step and the last step of each classes.
And this is very important to verify separately each boundary value because usually there are a lot of bugs, especially on these edges.
Yeah, one of the main consideration why you should use these techniques is because these like edges of each class, this is the position where a lot of bugs may occur, some human mistake, yeah, maybe the requirements was vague, maybe the code wasn't very specified these moments. So you should check these values like separately, maybe even create separate test cases. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, hope also these techniques become familiar to you, and we continue with the next one. It's pairwise testing.
Yeah, it's usually appropriate when you should test some kind of numerous combinations. Yeah. So here you can see like screenshot from Amazon popular site, and the idea was to choose TV. And let's imagine that our developers decided to implement a new feature, filtering, and now testers should test this feature. And if you look at the screen, you can just only imagine how many combinations of this input you can create. It's just,
I
I,
even can't imagine because if we select one from option from one category, we should verify it from each other option from other categories. So the options, the checks are million, I think, on the screen.
yeah, and still you should somehow to perform testing to be sure in results. And even if you will try to perform it like randomly, yeah, it's still a big challenge because you have no idea how to choose appropriate, yeah,
Yeah,
combinations.
absolutely. And you can't guarantee that there is no bugs. So
Yeah,
because just
maybe.
you, because of your selection, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe there are even some limitation. For example, one seller
Mhm.
specifies that he produced TVs with only specific screen size, or maybe with some number of ports and so on. So you should take this limitation into account So like kind of additional combinations or impossibility of random combination creations.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So here, pairwise testing can help you. According to pairwise testing, there are some special tools which can be used to reduce number of combinations, because once again, it's impossible to verify all of them. And the goal of pairwise testing is to reduce number of combinations from the one hand, and from the other hand is to verify combinations, because they say that testing combinations can help to find more bugs.
yeah, and still pairwise tools are even so smart that they identify the number of combinations that can guarantee a proper testing. So they will count all the number of all combinations and select the appropriate number of tests for you to perform, and generate this combination automatically taking into consideration all your limitation.
Absolutely.
So while test design, applying these test design techniques, you should create just one test case.
Yeah, and also use a table, special table, which will be generated by this automation tool, and to check all these like rows in this table based on your created test case.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, cool and simple. I hope these techniques also become more familiar to you. We talked about domain testing, including boundary value analysis, equivalence partitioning, and pairwise testing.
Yeah, we hope that you will apply this knowledge in practice.
Yeah.
See you. Bye.
See you. Bye.